Awesome. So yeah, we can continue chatting about what we were chatting about. But recently I've been, because now with the alternative media being so heavily censored and so many people have to find alternatives. Before it was like a lot of people were just interested in alternatives because they're sick of YouTube. But now like a lot of people are they've forced their hand to have to find alternatives because now basically you're getting kicked off YouTube, you're getting kicked off Twitter. You know those major platforms can't be used for anything that's somewhat controversial or goes against the mainstream narrative. So you're starting to see a lot of things like Float get a lot more attention. Obviously, Ben Swan started his ISC. I say obviously, not some people might have never heard of it, but it's called ISC.media. It's like kind of a video platform. He puts, I know the pandemic documentary was on there. Um, Derek Bros, his documentary called Dark Winter, I believe, was on there.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of people are going on there and posting stuff. You can create an account there. BitChute has obviously popularity has gone up. Library, and then just recently I just connected with this guy, Matthew, who started a company called Content Safe, and it's actually a great idea because as like a podcaster,
Hmm.
we have the ability to post on our host website. I'm assuming this is how you do it, and then
Yes.
they send it to
Distribute it.
exactly.
Yes.
So Content Safe does the same thing, but with videos. So what you'll do is you can upload it on whatever YouTube or whatever platform you're using, and they will actually send it to all the other ones. They'll send it to Float, Library, and all that stuff. So it's a fairly new company. The guy Matthew is a mutual friend of Richard Grove and I, and he's the one who introduced me. And I saw Richard Grove talk about it, and then I hit up Richard Grove. I'm like, hey, what is this all about? This sounds like a great idea because one of the reasons why I haven't posted to BitChute or Library or Float or any of these other platforms is because it's super time consuming to
Yes.
have to post on every specific one individually, put the tags, put the artwork, do all that stuff. It's like, oh boy, I'm like, I don't even get that many people watching the video.
Hmm.
Why spend all that time? And then next thing you know, you find out that like BitChute goes out of business or it doesn't become the next hit, for a video platform, and you spend all that time uploading your content. So this kind of solves some of that. And it's funny because I had a call with him, so I was introduced to him and we had a long conversation. One thing I love about a lot of these other platforms that are popping up like Float and Kinsley Edwards has been on a couple Union of the Unwanted shows that I do, which for listeners who aren't familiar with that, it's kind of like a roundtable alternative media hangout show where like it's a big conference call with just people into alternative media, researchers, thinkers, people in tech, all that stuff. And so Kinsley Edwards, I mean, it was nice to find out that he's actually motivated by like freedom and liberty, and he has a lot of the same passions that the content creators have. So it's
Yes.
not just somebody who's creating a platform for passionate content creators, but the guy who's creating the platform actually has the same views and same passions, which makes you feel a little bit better about the idea that in time it's not going to end up turning against us, right? We're not going to
Mm.
all jump in, make this guy a bunch of money or get this guy, well, I don't know how he makes money, but get him all this attention, and then next thing you know, he's taking money from sponsors and all this stuff, and he's slowly censoring things. So I think it's nice when you meet these guys that they have they really do care about censorship. It's not just like the next great business move or opportunity or investment. They actually care about censorship and these issues. So when I talked to Matthew from Content Save, it was nice to see that too, where this guy was like a long time listener of a lot of the podcasts that I've been on, and he I think he heard me on Corbett or I don't know on
Mm.
Richard Grove or somewhere, but we're familiar with a lot of the same people or whatnot. So it's cool because when one door closes, another one opens. And I think, like Ben Swan said when he was on my show, and I keep repeating this because I think there is a lot of truth to it. I think they overplayed their hand. I think that they finally got to the point where they censored so much that next thing you know, YouTube's going to be known for like cat videos and how-to videos, and it's not going to be the place where you can find any alternative news or media or research or documentaries, nothing that is thought-provoking. And that's a huge issue because a lot of us, and I'm sure it's similar to your story, YouTube was one of those places you use to do some research. It was a decent platform to go down some rabbit holes and be exposed to some people's work and research and whatnot. And now it's like I can't. I mean, I feel bad for anybody who's new to this scene, because when I first got into it, it was super easy to run into just really interesting researchers and documentaries and podcasters and authors. And now it's like it takes some serious work to get past all the mainstream stuff that's being force fed to you to finally get to something that's interesting. I mean, you can't use Google anymore, their search engine, and DuckDuckGo's better, but it's not perfect. And really, YouTube is one of the most used search engines in the world. I think it's second only to Google. So think about how many people are being force fed that mainstream narrative.
Yes, no alternative viewpoints to challenge, as we try to do, challenge mainstream media, mainstream thoughts, to provoke idea, to grow someone as an individual rather than being part of the herd type mentality. Um, I think a lot of people currently are hearing this censorship topic and fake news, and they're not really fully understanding. And as you've highlighted, you can go onto YouTube, like for instance, for the listeners, if you go onto YouTube and go onto your homepage, what is actually on your homepage which you are going to consume? It's filled with nonsense, absolute nonsense. You could literally, if you've got your player on autoplay and you forget to press pause and it goes onto a video which is on the recommended, straight away on your homepage, you're going to have that style video replicated 17 times. And then we're going to see mainstream news, a strip of mainstream news talking about the zombie apocalypse. Then we're going to see, as you say, cat videos and just stuff that has nothing to do with your interests, with the subscriberships you have. And then let's look at the subscribers. So you might be subscribed to 1,000 people, for instance, and then you're thinking, well, I haven't heard from Ricky in ages. Is Ricky still doing videos and podcasts and stuff? And you'll search down, you'll type his name, and you think, how comes his name's not popping up? And you'll go through your subscriptions, and you'll think, well, I don't actually see him. Let me try, let me go and find him via social media. And you've got to go to the social media first, click on a link, to then go back to YouTube to find the channel again. And then you realize that you've been unsubscribed.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. And like we were saying before this, like there's no reason why your stuff or my stuff has such little views on YouTube. Besides the fact that chances are we're probably both shadow banned to some extent. Because I remember when I uploaded the Mickey Willis video, I think it's still like there's videos before and after it. Mickey Willis was the filmmaker who did one of the most censored, controversial documentaries of all time, Plandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and yet like it's barely getting views. And I'm like, I don't how are videos before and after it getting more views? And it's like, okay, obviously there's something going on here. And I just think that in some cases, like one technique that I've used is one I've never monetized. I knew right from the beginning I was going to. I mean, initially it wasn't even an issue because my show wasn't big enough where I could monetize on YouTube, I believe. So I didn't really think much about it. I'm like, well, even if I monetize, I'm like, how much money am I going to get? And then as the show got bigger, and then it actually became something I could kind of entertain. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, one, the money's not going to be much because I'm not that big on YouTube, and two, how long is that money going to be coming in before I get kicked out or flagged or whatnot? The chances of me getting these conversations out there are going to be much greater if I don't go into a business relationship with YouTube. I just put the stuff out there, never monetize, no commercials. I never say it's for kids. I always say it's not for kids because, as you know, they ask you that when you upload
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so I'm like, you know what? It might be harder to run into my stuff because I say it's not for kids and whatnot. Because a lot of other YouTubers I've talked to have said like that makes a drastic difference. It's the same thing with iTunes, and if you swear or whatnot, or if it's a clean podcast, like you're much more likely in almost all platforms that if it can be consumed by the general public, kids, teenagers, whatever, they're much more likely to push your stuff. But that also means that you're not talking about anything controversial. It also means that uh, I mean that you're probably censoring yourself slightly. So there's those concerns too, where it's like I don't want to censor myself. This is how I talk if we're hanging out at the pub, having a drink, watching a
Mm-hmm.
game. So to me, like, I think people like that, and I think it was one of the appeals with podcasts in the first place, was the fact that it was refreshing compared to what they were being force fed on TV and newspapers and whatnot. So I think that, you can't take that away from people, but and then if you do that, then it's much harder to reach people, and that's why I like the Union of the Unwanted, because it really has become a community where people like cross pollinate and people are exposed to other people's work. And I'm sure, as you have seen in the podcast world, people are pretty quick to help you out if you need something. They're
Yes.
pretty friendly. It's not really that competitive. I mean, the good thing is, like, people can subscribe to your show, they can subscribe to my show. Like, we're not competing with one another. It's not like they have to pick one. So people in the same way that people have been in the past super good to me in regards to helping me out. I mean, James Corbett was one of my first guests. He's always been super grateful with his time. I mean, throughout the years. I mean, I think this is probably the longest time period that we haven't done a podcast. But usually he's on like once a month, once every other month or whatnot, and which is doesn't seem like a lot, but the dude's always popping out
Yeah,
content.
exactly.
Really hard to find that free time. So we throughout the years we've done a lot of stuff together, and he's always been super nice. I've had Robbie Martin used to be on quite a bit. I had
Mhm.
so many Daniele Bignelli, so many great guests that were I mean, I couldn't thank him enough for coming onto a platform that really didn't have much to offer besides just the dream of sparking thought, creating a ripple, and
Yes.
hoping to spread these interesting conversations. And that alone was all the motivation they needed to come on. And to me, I was super grateful. Jason Burmis was one of my first guests, which is cool because he got out of the alternative media world for a while, and then he came back.
Yeah.
So able to reconnect with him. And Richard Grove and so many kind people that have really helped out in little ways, things behind the scenes, just like suggesting my show to somebody else or connecting me with somebody else or what. But and so I'll try to do the same thing. If somebody says, "Hey, do you have contact information?" And if it's somebody that I think won't get pissed, I'm giving out that I'll be more than happy. And I kind of have a good feeling of like the type of people that I think the majority of people will be kind of cool. So
Definitely. I mean,
yeah.
you hit a nail on the head with that. I mean, you're highlighting the fact about the community element of it. It's not so much about we're not competing against each other. We're sparking ideas, creating relationships, giving people an opportunity to make informed decisions um, in many aspects of life, whether it be political, whether it be health wise. We cover so vast different areas that, and because we're so interested in imparting the information that we've learned and which we have a passion for, as you say, it's not a case of, well, I'm going to go into YouTube and I'm going to look to monetize it. None of my channels have ever been monetized. The very first channel I had, um, before it was shut down within 9 months, I think it was like 1.9 million views. I didn't even entertain the idea of trying to monetize that. People suggested it, but I thought, well, no, this isn't about that. This is about me presenting information, people consuming it, and coming back for more. That's all it's about. If I can help somebody in that process, give them that opportunity, that step, that tool to enable their life to be a little bit better, that's a victory for me.
Yeah, I mean that's so important. I mean, you don't know how many times I've people have come to me with, and I appreciate like people try to find ways to monetize things on my show, either like people who want to sponsor on the show, or people who like have this business plan or idea or something they want to propose to me, and I mean sometimes I'm like, oh, dude, if I just spend a little bit more time thinking about monetizing, maybe I could um maybe I could do this full time one day, or at least much sooner, because I still have hope that I could do it full time one day if it keeps growing and I keep putting out content that people enjoy and that I enjoy doing. And that's a big part of it too, is like I also want to continue to enjoy doing this, and if I spend too much time focused on monetizing, then I'm not going to enjoy doing it, and then the show's going to suck, or I'm going to stop doing it or whatnot. So it's the reason why I would love to do this full time is because I enjoy it. Why else would I have such a passion to do it full time? So if I get so caught up in like sponsors and monetizing all this stuff, and I'm two people so two people that are huge influences on my show are Joe Rogan and James Corbett, two people that probably have never met, and and seem drastically different, but their shows were a huge influence because one, I was a huge fan of both of them, but I'm also a fan of the way they did things. So like James Corbett, the whole open source thing, like
Yes.
that's the reason I do my show open source. I tell people post it anywhere you want. I don't care. I don't care if I get the hits or somebody else gets the hits. I just care that the conversations are out there. And then Joe Rogan with the casual conversation, the fact that you try to have a long form conversation, you don't force the conversation in any direction, and you go wherever it takes you. And so I loved both those things about those shows. So I try to bring them together in my show. And so to me, it's like, yeah, I'd love to monetize. I mean, I don't even like telling people in the beginning of my shows that like I have a Patreon page and blah blah blah. And I had a couple fans of mine hit me up, and thank you for those listeners who did finally push me to start saying, hey, start doing the value for value thing, because I have seen a uptake a little bit in Patreon supporters since then, and it's not a whole lot of effort that needs to go into just saying, hey, let's do a value for value thing. Like if you get some value out of this show, give some value back. But I always remind them, like, it doesn't mean financially. It means maybe rate the show, maybe tell a friend about the show,
Yeah.
maybe, because it's like, I do, all of us, I mean, we're doing this because we care. And I think all great artists, all great creators, all great thinkers, all great whatever craft you're getting into, they're motivated by their work. They're initially motivated by some passion that they have, or doing something that can easily be forgotten if you get caught up in making money and doing what only or only being concerned about doing things that will make you more money. And I think that's a real problem. I think Rogan, I mean, he's done like 1,000 and whatever many episodes. So think about how many hours of him talking exist online. A lot. So you have a pretty good feel if you've been a long time listener like I have. I've probably listened to it. And I don't listen to him nearly as much as I used to, but I'm pretty sure I've listened to many hours to get a pretty good feeling on who he is as a person. Because even if you were bullshitting, eventually it would come out. Some of your true colors would shine
Yes.
at times. And I have a pretty good idea that when he says he's just trying to have a conversation, he doesn't have an agenda, that for the most part, I think he's right. And I mean, I definitely have some issues with some of his stuff in regards to like the vaccine thing. Like I feel he tiptoes around really having anybody who will really push back against some of his views. But since he's been on Spotify and then changed his studio and moved to Texas, he's been much more open to both sides. He just has such a big influence that I think it's okay for you to have a opinion. It's to me, it's not okay to only show people one side of the opinion when so many people really respect your perspective, opinions, and the people you have on and are willing to have on. The fact you don't have somebody from the other side, I mean, Adam Curry was the closest thing, and even that conversation never really got deep into Adam Curry's true perspectives and opinions on the vaccine debate. But
Hmm.
I just think that when you're that influential, and that's another thing too, right? Like we both are critiquing from our perspectives. Like
Yes.
you know where I'm going with this, right? Like if we were them, if we were him, I should say, and we knew that every single, I mean, he says something, it makes front page news. Like,
Exactly.
and it's like if you and I say something wrong, or we mess up, or we get a statistic wrong, or we have a certain guess on, like it doesn't make front page news. I mean, I was just talking to Sam not too long ago after he had the guitars from Deftones on,
Mm.
and we were joking around about how like so many things that were said on that podcast end up being articles on other websites and people writing about it. So it's like when you get a big platform, like I wonder if some of that pressure of people are listening, people aren't just listening, but millions of people are listening, and it's incredibly influential. I wonder if that weighs on some, like you almost end up self-censoring because
Yes.
I don't want to talk about this because it causes too much shit, and I don't want to deal with that shit. But he also, I think I truly do believe him, because when he says that he doesn't read comments or whatever, I mean, James Corbett's the same thing. He every once in a while I think he reads them, but for the most part I think he doesn't interact fully with his fans and listen to, because you can get caught up in like this
You
being
can. You can, Ricky, and luckily, I don't think we're in a position where we're getting hundreds of thousands of comments. Generally, I don't think. Just thinking about it rudimentarily, I don't think I've had people challenge, but in a respectful way. More on social media, your social platforms. I've had potential startings of arguments, but what I would do is just block and delete or delete their comment and that's it, or not even respond. Luckily, as I say on YouTube, generally the response or the comments are generally pretty like, thanks for the information. I'm going to check that out, or can you refer me to some more information, etc. But as you say, with that, putting yourself into that position where you are having a huge exposure, of course you're going to start to think, because I don't self-censor, but I always try and, because words are powerful, we know words are very powerful, and I want to be as correct and as accurate as possible. So I will always think as hard as I can before I speak, if it's not a pre-scripted type situation. But add on tens of millions of people who are going to be consuming that information. That is a big pressure. Um, and as you've highlighted, since he's moved to Austin, we have seen, and even before the move, I would say I saw Mr. Rogan sort of going a lot more, or being a lot more open in regards to the zombie apocalypse and what's taking place. Um, Especially with all the statistics, he would always at the start of it, oh, but look at the statistics, look at what the doctors are saying. But now it's like, this is bullshit. This is a bit, this doesn't make sense. We need to try and look at some other things, kind of thing. He's actually, questioning whereas historically he wasn't asking those questions. He was like, this is what the scientist says, do what they say, which was, for me, as a long time listener, I was like, Joe, what on earth are you saying? Get someone else on here and let them tell you, and you have the kind of back and forth with them, have that conversation from the alternative view.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, you're seeing it more and more with him. Like when I think it was like some point right before the lockdown in the US or whatever, he or maybe right when things were locking down, he had a doctor on. I forget what his name was. And basically just like repeated all the same stuff in the mainstream media. And I remember having, one person who I disagree with quite often is my brother. We are completely different, and we'll get in. He'll be like, "Hey, even Joe Rogan thinks it's a big deal, and you're a fan of Joe Rogan." And I'm like, "Listen, just because I like somebody doesn't mean I have to agree with them on everything all the time." And second, a lot of people in the beginning of this, they just I almost feel like it was September 11th or any other big event where your first reaction was, there's no way there could be any, this is so crazy that there's no way somebody could have let this happen or wanted it to happen or going to capitalize on it happening. And so I think it is, that a lot of people were a little confused and wanted to kind of, I don't know, reserve judgment or reserve their opinions until more stuff came out. And I think it's only a example of how obvious it is that we were lied to. That even somebody like Joe Rogan, who publicly during podcasts seemed to be taking it quite seriously, has now done a full 360 where now he's pretty open with saying that, yeah, 99% of people are going to be okay. Yeah, the all the lockdowns are ridiculous, this is going way too far, and blah blah blah. So it's like he started in one place, agreeing with the mainstream narrative, and then because he thinks for himself and he was willing to look at other perspectives. And I think the censorship thing bothered him quite a bit, because he would openly talk about how he had an issue with them censoring doctors, people who were talking about vitamin C and vitamin D and
Mm,
strengthening your immune system. And as a guy who's always been in health and nutrition, he knew, like, why, like, this is ridiculous. Why is this being censored? Why is this dangerous information? And if this is considered dangerous information, then what the hell's going on here?
yeah.
Maybe there's some other information that's being censored that I should look into. And I think that all kind of sparked what happened now. And I think it's for the best. The fact that he had Adam Curry on for his first episode once he left California, and then he brought Alex Jones back. And I know Alex Jones gets a lot of shit because every time he's on, it's like, well, look it up, Jamie. Look it up, Jamie. But I think a lot of that comes from, like what we discussed, the fact that there's so many people listening to his show, and so many people are going to say, why are you having this lunatic Alex Jones on? That if he doesn't do that, to cover his ass a little bit, that be like, okay, it's not that I'm picking on Alex Jones, but it's more that I'm letting people know that there's some truth to what you're saying,
Yeah.
and I'm not letting you talk and rant, but I'm saying, hey, if you're bringing this up, no. Before you go any further, let's look it up. Let's look it up and let's see if it's valid. And I think it actually helps Rogan with some of the backlash, and I think it actually helps Alex Jones because it proves that a lot of the things that are coming out of his mouth that sound too crazy to believe, there's actually some truth to it.
Definitely. And I think even outside of that latter part, I think the general public are seeing, because he's spoken about so many different things, so many various topics years ago, and now those same topics are working their way through mainstream media as facts. Like, this is what's going on, and you have to, you know, for some people who don't know where who originally was talking about this, it's like, oh my God, the mainstream media's, they've said this, and then Mr. Jones will come on and say, look, I spoke about this 4 years ago. Don't you remember this documentary I did maybe 10 years ago? I've spoken about all of this stuff. So he's very, I wouldn't say prophetic, but he's very good at absorbing, reading information, retaining the information, um, and putting that information out. Sometimes it's very shock value, but there's always some value or some grain of truth within that. Um, Going back to his last appearance with Rogan and Tim Dillon, I think that out of all of the three appearances he's had, I I would rate them all in the number. So his first appearance was the best, the second one was the second best, and the third was the third best, in my opinion. Just based upon, I think Alex was trying too much, trying too hard to do outlandish and outrageous things to get get views, kind of thing. Whereas he should have just, come on, we know who you are, Alex Jones. We've seen you for 10 plus years. From 2000, for me, 2002, I've started consuming Alex Jones material. So we know what you're about. We know how the kind of intensity you bring and what kind of information. Just sit with Joe, have a drink, smoke some weed if you want to do that, smoke a cigar, and just talk. Let Jamie do the fact checking and let it go out. All of the extra stuff, I think it's a bit gimmicky.
Yeah, I'm always I almost feel like I wonder if some of it is because if he wasn't being funny or telling jokes or maybe saying some things that's humorous, then it would be too dark and depressing. And because sometimes you could tell he's having fun being over the top,
Yeah.
he's getting mad and he's saying all these crazy things and screaming out loud. I think it makes it a little easier to consume the information because it's entertaining, it's funny, and I also I wonder if because him and Rogan have known each other for so long that he gets so comfortable just hanging out with them
Hmm.
that he just kind of feels like, hey, he can kind of bullshit and be funny, and or sometimes because you're with other comedians, you're attempting to be funny too to kind of fit in or whatnot. That could be a part of it. I know he was on the Tim Pool's show not too long ago too, and it was him and Michael Malice, and it was a pretty interesting conversation. I don't think Tim put it on his YouTube channel. I think for the purpose of being worried about getting banned or
Yeah.
whatnot or being flagged. But I think somebody sent it to me, and I'm trying to think where I found him. I'm sure it's on BitChute, but that was a fun conversation too. So I mean, it is one of those things where I know some people want to hate on him. He absolutely has been kind of soft in Israel. I
Goes without saying, Ricky.
know, that's I mean I can see why him and Trump get along because they both have the same problem on Israel. It's just the but you because you disagree with him on one thing doesn't mean that he hasn't done some good in just foreign policy, opening people's eyes to foreign policy just in general, like in regards to like being anti-war regardless who's been in office. I mean, people forget like he's been pretty consistent with that,
Hmm.
regardless who's been in office, Republicans or Democrats. And So he's been good with that. Some of the other stuff, the CIA stuff, the Operation Paperclip, he talks about all the time, and he talks about, the oh, Con COINTELPRO and
COINTELPRO, Operation Northwoods as well.
Woods. Yeah, I mean, these are stuff that Rogan also talks about. So just all these type of things that are kind of MK Ultra, all these keywords that are kind of very well known and been kind of talked about forever in the alternative media community. He's kind of brought it to a bigger audience and made it much more. I guess I don't know. I mean, probably a lot of people who haven't dive deep down those rabbit holes, he's exposed them to some of these things, so I think that's good. But yeah, I mean, I can also see the other argument that somebody like Alex Jones also says such outrageous things that it's hard for anybody to take something seriously that he also said. It's like if I say, hey, MK Ultra, the CIA was working on mind control and Mandalorian candidates using LSD, and they're using taxpayers' money, and they're doing it on drug addicts and homeless people and people that they found in shelters and whatnot. And then people would be like, "Oh, didn't Alex Jones say that? That sounds crazy." So it's like
Yeah.
Alex Jones agrees with you on something that can get you in trouble too because people will immediately dismiss it. So it is this love-hate thing. I mean, initially 9/11 and A Road to Tyranny and some of his um, first documentaries were really great documentaries that really exposed a lot of people to some interesting stuff. Even Richard Grove, who did State of Mind, the Psychology of Control, another great documentary about just the history of mind control and how the elite purposely and has forever attempted to control the masses and whatnot. That documentary was pushed by Alex Jones. They helped him with it. Same thing with A Noble Lie, which is by Free Mind Films. I've had Chris Emery on, and actually Chris and I and James Corbett, I think it was last year, did a whole OKC special podcast because it was always one of those events that I always found intriguing and always got my attention because it was on my birthday, April 19th. So it was just growing up, I'm always like, what a crazy event. It happened on my birthday. So I was always super intrigued with it. But Alex Jones helped with A Noble Eye and pushed that and marketed it. So it is one of those things where he has helped other filmmakers and push other great documentaries and great work. So it's yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those debates that are going to happen forever, right? It's like
Definitely.
more good or more harm for the alternative media community.
Yeah. I mean, also, I mean, we can't be under any illusions that everybody has their own agenda, and there's nothing wrong with having your own agenda. Um, the problem lies with agendas is what is the ultimate goal of the agenda? Is it for good or is it for bad? Let's just look at it black and white, as they say. So we have agendas. Everybody as people have agendas, but is your agenda to, as my mission statement is, to uplift fallen humanity? Are we trying to do that, or are we trying to destroy humanity and build wealth for self?
That's such an important point because this is a issue that a lot of people in the alternative media community or people who just are looking at things from different perspectives run into a lot when trying to share information with other people because they'll be like, oh, that came from that website and they're left leaning, or that came from that website and they're right leaning, or that came from that source and he's a conspiracy theorist, or and it's like you said, everybody has an agenda. But what is the agenda? And sometimes what that agenda is doesn't necessarily change the fact that it's good information, right? So, like, if some environmentalist, okay, who really believes in global warming and thinks it's the biggest issue ever, exposes some paper, some research that BP did or some big chemical company did, showing that pollution was causing some certain issues with our environment. Like, yeah, their agenda might be to push global warming and the fact that it or they think that it's the biggest issue ever. So that might be an agenda that you might not agree with. But if they expose some good information and some corruption, then it's worth listening to. It's same thing with like, I always said, or I have been saying a lot lately. I always say, I always said. I should stop doing that. But the if you're watching the cable TV or news, mainstream media. The left, you have the left, you have MSNBC, and then you have the right, you have Fox News. And both of them, you can find some decent articles at times. Not because they have a good agenda or agenda you agree with. Like the left might only have the agenda of exposing the right. So it's not a good agenda. They don't care about truth. They don't care about exposing corruption. They only care about exposing corruption on the other side. But
Mhm.
if they do that, and they do find some corruption, even if it's not for moral reasons and their moral compass is broken, and they only care about exposing corruption on the other side, we can't disregard the information, right? And I think too often people will disregard the information because of the source. And I can completely disagree with somebody on everything, but if they bring something interesting to the table, then I'll still, I won't say I fully promote their work, but I will be more than happy to at least promote that idea. And
Yes.
I had Jack Abramoff on my show. He was one of the worst people ever. I mean, he was, Casino Jack, that HBO documentary.
Hmm.
There's also a movie with Kevin Spacey playing him, which is another awful person. And
Most
he
definitely.
fits that role even better now that everything came to light. But it's just one of those things where, like, he's not a great person, but he was in the inside. Okay, he didn't just was a part of the system. He was one of the best at manipulating the system. So if I can have him on and really give us a good perspective on how it's corrupt, how it works, how people take advantage of it, and all this stuff. Like, yeah, I don't have to agree with his views on lobbying. I don't have to agree with his political views, his religious views. I don't have to agree with any of that stuff. But if he brings something interesting to the table that I think can help us better understand the issues with lobbying and government and how corrupt the system is, then why wouldn't I have him on my show? It's the same thing with like Roger Stone, who was just on the Union of the Unwanted. I've had some people, say, oh, you know I shouldn't say have some issues. I've had some comments from friends of mine or people in the alternative media community are like, oh, Roger Stone on the Union Unwanted, come on, man. And I'm just like, he's in the inside. I'm like, how
Yes.
many people in the alternative media community would ever have the opportunity to grill him or question him about anything? And this guy's in the inside. We can sit in the outside and just critique what's going on in the inside, but when you can actually talk to somebody in the inside, even if you disagree with him on a bunch of stuff, he might help shine some light on some things that we weren't aware of or we didn't know about. And so I think there's something positive that can be taken out of a conversation with somebody like him. So, I don't like to dismiss people immediately. Like I said, you don't have to agree with everybody on everything. And somebody could even be a shithead, right? You can go to the extreme. Like you can honestly think that like Roger Stone's the worst person ever, which I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who do that. But if you could think that, but still be like, you know what? If I could get him on my show, I think I could get some interesting information out of him that I couldn't get from anybody else, or I couldn't get. There's nobody else I could book on my show that is that close to being in the inside as him. So I don't know. I mean, do you agree with everything I just said?
Oh no, definitely. It's as I always say, eat the meat and discard the bones. It's as simple as you can't, if you're a meat eater and you're going to consume a carcass, you're not going to eat the bones as well, are you? That shit needs to go unless you're going to use some of for broth, etc. But ultimately, the physical elements of the bones, cartilage, etc., you're going to generally discard of that. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Have the opportunity, be open, have a conversation. If it's a case that we're going to have a conversation, and also I'm going to ask you some very difficult questions because that's what I do. Then all better. It's not about having the same kind of ideologies. It's about having an open conversation, and at the end of that conversation, people can dissect it. People can say, you know what, my ideas of that person before have now changed, or they're still the same, but I got some information out from that person which is valuable. I can take that um, and move forward, or apply that to a different realm of study which I'm going into. So I would 100% agree. And I would say